Spring 1944, Britain's south coast harbors. For 4 years, these ports had been half empty, ghost docks. The scars of Dunkirk still visible. Then America arrived, not with a few ships, with an industrial avalanche. In 5 months, 1.5 million troops, 2 million tons of supplies, and nearly 7,000 vessels flooded British ports. Liberty ships appeared faster than the Royal Navy could count them. Harbors that once held 24 destroyers vanished under forests of landing craft. British admirals who'd spent years managing scarcity suddenly confronted abundance beyond comprehension. The men who doubted Operation Overlord could ever work walked those docks and realized the invasion was actually going to happen. Let me show you how American industrial might turned Allied doubt into certainty and made June 6, 1944 inevitable. The post-Dunkirk reality. After Dunkirk in 1940, Britain had numbers to haunt its naval planners. They'd rescued 340,000 troops in an evacuation so miraculous it entered legend. But the cost was brutal. Ships lost, equipment abandoned, and most critically, the infrastructure to mount a return invasion simply didn't exist. By 1943, British military leadership knew one thing with absolute clarity. There was no way to invade Hitler's Europe without American production capacity. Not just American soldiers, American ships, American factories, American assembly lines working 3 shifts a day. The scale required was beyond anything attempted in military history. Planning documents estimated they'd need thousands of vessels, landing craft, transport ships, destroyers, battleships for shore bombardment. The logistical puzzle seemed impossible. And then Operation Bolero began, the greatest logistics operation in history. Operation Bolero was the code name for the American military buildup in Britain. It started in April 1942 with a simple mission: get American forces and equipment to England in preparation for an eventual cross-channel invasion. What followed was the largest peacetime deployment of military forces ever attempted. American troops started arriving in 1942. By July 1943, about 238,000 had crossed the Atlantic. Respectable numbers, but not nearly enough for the invasion the Allies were planning. Then something changed. After the Trident Conference in May 1943, when Allied leadership committed to a May 1944 invasion date, Bolero shifted into overdrive. Between July 1943 and May 1944, over 1 million additional American troops arrived in Britain. The flow became a flood. By D-Day, 1.5 million American soldiers, sailors, and airmen were stationed across the British Isles. The British had never seen anything like it. Villages swelled with American GIs. Airfields that took months to build suddenly materialized in the countryside. Supply depots the size of small cities sprang up seemingly overnight. But it was the ships that changed everything. The Liberty ship revolution. The backbone of the American sea lift was an ugly, utilitarian cargo vessel called the Liberty ship. Designed for mass production, these 441-foot freighters could carry over 10,000 tons of cargo. They were slow. They weren't pretty. President Roosevelt himself called them a dreadful-looking object. But they could be built fast. American shipyards constructed 2,710 Liberty ships between 1941 and 1945. That's an average of 3 ships every 2 days. 18 shipyards across the United States, many built specifically for the war effort, operated around the clock. The speed was revolutionary. Early Liberty ships took 230 days to build. By 1943, Henry Kaiser's shipyards had cut that to 45 days. One ship, the SS Robert E. Peary, was built in just 4 days and 15 hours as a publicity stunt. The average construction time in 1943 was 42 days. British naval officers watching this production weren't just impressed, they were stunned. The Royal Navy had been building ships for centuries, and nothing in their experience prepared them for American industrial capacity operating at wartime speed. Liberty ships carried everything: tanks, ammunition, food, fuel, medical supplies. The tonnage numbers tell the story. Between January and May 1944 alone, over 2 million tons of cargo arrived in British ports. That represented 40% of all cargo shipped from America to Britain since 1942. The invasion fleet assembles. By early 1944, Britain's ports were transforming. Southampton, Plymouth, Portland, Portsmouth, Dover, each became staging grounds for the largest invasion fleet in history. Admiral Bertram Ramsay commanded the Allied naval forces. A Royal Navy veteran who'd orchestrated the Dunkirk evacuation, Ramsey understood maritime logistics better than almost anyone alive. Even he was overwhelmed by what America delivered. The invasion plan called for nearly 7,000 vessels, transport ships to carry troops, landing craft to get them ashore, destroyers and cruisers for fire support, battleships to bombard German fortifications, minesweepers to clear paths, supply ships to sustain the operation. America provided the bulk of it. Admiral Alan Kirk commanded the Western Naval Task Force, responsible for landing American troops at Utah and Omaha beaches. His force alone included battleships like the USS Nevada, Texas, and Arkansas, heavy cruisers, dozens of destroyers, hundreds of landing craft. When those ships assembled in British harbors, the scale became visible. An American bomber pilot flying over the channel before D-Day reported, "You could have walked across from one side to the other. There were that many ships out there." British Admiral Philip Vian, commanding the Eastern Naval Task Force for the British and Canadian beaches, watched the anchorages fill with vessels and understood what he was seeing. This wasn't optimistic planning. This was certainty made manifest in steel and welded seams, the training and the doubt. Not everyone believed it would work. Amphibious assaults are among the most complex military operations possible. Timing must be perfect, weather cooperative, intelligence accurate, equipment functional, and you're attacking fortified positions with troops vulnerable in landing craft. The Germans knew an invasion was coming. They'd fortified the entire Atlantic coast with what they called the Atlantic Wall, bunkers, artillery emplacements, minefields, underwater obstacles designed to rip apart landing craft. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, tasked with defending France, believed if the Allies could be stopped on the beaches, the invasion would fail. He poured resources into coastal defenses, convinced that a repelled landing would delay any follow-up attempt for years. British military planners worried. They'd tried amphibious assaults before. Dieppe in 1942 had been a catastrophe. The Germans massacred Canadian troops on the beach. If Normandy went the same way, the war could drag on indefinitely. Training exercises heightened these concerns. In April 1944, during Exercise Tiger off Slapton Sands, German torpedo boats attacked American landing ships in a night raid. Over 700 American soldiers and sailors died. The disaster was kept secret to preserve morale, but senior commanders knew how fragile these operations could be, and yet the ships kept arriving. The American determination. What separated the American approach from previous Allied planning was industrial confidence. The British and Canadians brought experience, tactical knowledge, and battle-hardened units. The Americans brought production capacity that made failure seem impossible through sheer weight of resources. If landing craft were destroyed in training, build more. If supplies were lost to U-boats, ship more. If the first assault wave faltered, land more troops. This wasn't recklessness. It was calculated risk management backed by factories running 24-hour shifts across an entire continent. By May 1944, the staging areas were full. Soldiers were sealed into marshalling camps with no outside communication. The invasion force was ready. Weather delayed the launch by 24 hours. On the morning of June 6, 1944, nearly 7,000 ships lay off the Normandy coast. The Germans, still convinced the main invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais, were caught unprepared. The deception worked perfectly, but it only bought time. What made the invasion succeed was the fleet itself. British commanders who'd spent the war managing scarcity watched wave after wave of American landing craft hit the beaches. Even when casualties mounted at Omaha, reinforcements kept coming. Supply ships kept unloading. Naval gunfire kept hammering German positions. The industrial capacity that filled British harbors in the spring of 1944 sustained the invasion through the critical first weeks. By the end of June, over 850,000 troops and 150,000 vehicles had been landed in Normandy. The legacy. The D-Day invasion succeeded for many reasons. Allied air superiority, effective deception, German command confusion, brave troops willing to storm fortified beaches. But underlying all of it was American industrial production that made the impossible logistically feasible. The Liberty ships that crowded British harbors weren't just transportation. They were symbols of a nation that could outbuild its enemies faster than they could destroy what was being built. Between 1942 and 1945, American shipyards produced more tonnage than the rest of the world combined. That capacity, visible in every harbor from Plymouth to Portsmouth, convinced Allied commanders that Overlord could work. British generals and admirals who walked those docks in early 1944 saw something that changed their assessment of the war. They saw certainty where there had been doubt. They saw the resources to sustain an invasion that would liberate Europe. The American fleet didn't just transport an army, it delivered the confidence that made D-Day inevitable. The next time someone tells you wars are won by soldiers alone, remember the shipyards. 1.5 million troops, 2,710 Liberty ships, 7,000 vessels off Normandy. British commanders doubted Overlord could work. Then they saw the American fleet, and doubt turned to certainty. That certainty won the war. If you want more stories about the logistics that shaped World War II, hit that like and subscribe button. Drop a comment. What other untold World War II stories deserve deep dive?